You're going to be very disappointed in me today, Mike.
Why is that?
I have a chat app on my computer now. Microsoft Teams for the win.
What? Is your
Yes.
church using Microsoft Teams? Huh.
We've been on Office 365 for 5 years now, 4 years, something like that. That was a move I helped us get into because so much of our staff is big on Office products, so that made sense for the organization. However, a couple of my teammates have figured out that Microsoft Teams lets them just get quick answers to things, and I didn't adopt this right away. So they've now pressured me into, Joe, you got to get this on your computer. It's like, that's fine, but I'm going to be unavailable a lot of the time. Just a heads up. So there's that.
I'll install it, but
Correct.
you can't make
yes.
me use it.
So it is on there. It's currently in Do Not Disturb mode. And I have the sign on the door, all the things, because we're recording at an odd time. So, yes. And no, the hyperactive hive mind has not captured Joe, Blake. At least I hope not. Anyway, we'll see. So yes, I'm sorry to say I've gone down that road at the moment. But I do know there are many, many ways that I can control how much time I spend with stuff like that. So getting breaks from it is something I'm capable of doing. I'm aware of that. So yes.
If anybody can break free from the evil clutches of Microsoft Teams, it is Joe Buelig.
I know how to hit Command Q. I can make it happen. So, super fun. Anyway, chat apps, not why we're here. It just came to mind because we're going to be diving into a Cal Newport book today. Thus, that came to mind. But we have some follow-up first. So I've got a couple points of follow-up from our last book. Looks like you've got a few here as well. One of those that I have is practicing the concept of phone narration. Specifically, in my case, it's for when I'm at home with my family. Not so much like whenever I'm in meetings and such, but I just want to make sure that like my kids specifically know what I'm doing on my phone when I'm on it around them. Like that's the piece that I'm trying to make sure is very, very clear. And I've learned that there are some cases when I'm on my phone and I'm realizing I need to tell them what I'm doing, and I really don't want to tell them what I'm doing. So it's like, hey, Dad, what are you doing right now? It's like, I'm seeing what's on Instagram. Sorry, let's stop doing that. Okay, all right. Now moving on. Now I'm checking the weather. So yes, that is quite the accountability. Telling your kids what you're doing on your phone when you're around them. That's highly recommended and a bit terrifying at the same time. So there's that. So I've been doing this as much as I can. Don't get it done all the time, but it's something I do recommend for folks.
So real quickly on the phone narration, I feel like, because that was one of mine too, I feel like we should just make a pact, us and the Bookworm listeners, to publicly shame anyone that we see using a device that's not practicing this. Just walk up to them real awkwardly and be like, hey, what you doing? And just wait for him to answer. Deal?
I will totally do this. Totally will.
Okay. All right.
I may
Good.
put the caveat on it that I need to at least know the person somewhat, because I could at least pass it off as Joe being the tech nerd who is trying to get you off your phone. Like, I can at least pass it off that way. If it's a complete stranger, that's just weird. Just totally weird.
So we were up in Door County this last weekend, and we have a teenage son. We were there with Rachel's sister and brother-in-law, who also have kids that are very close to our kids in age. And at one point, Toby was using his iPad sitting in a chair, and next to him was Quinn, who was sitting in a chair looking at his phone. And I was like, hey, screenagers, what you doing?
Screenagers.
They didn't appreciate that a whole lot, I don't think.
I have not heard that term, screenagers. Is this something you just made up?
I think so, but probably not.
All right. It's a new one to me, so I'll definitely steal it. That's for sure. Yes, I'm game for the shaming. The other follow-up that I had is to work on my end-of-day email habit, or as in create one. And I've done it a couple times over the last couple weeks. I've not been good about making sure that that's the time frame it happens, and I need to keep working on that one. So the goal here is that around 3:30, about 30 minutes before the end of my day, I would take some time to just run through my email and make sure I'm getting replies out, because I'm terrible at responding to emails. If you've sent me an email over the last 5 years and you got a response right away, you are the anomaly. So it doesn't happen very often, unless it's somebody that I'm actively working on a project with. Like if Mike were to send me an email about something important with Bookworm, you would get a response from me pretty quick. However, that's not typical. Just going to say that. So anyway, that's what I got. You, Mike?
All right. Yeah, I got a couple. Phone narration was one of mine as well. And I feel like I have done this. I've caught myself at least a couple of times actually doing this. Part of the reason why I want to point this out is I hope it gets reciprocated to me, because I'm sure there's points where I just am surfing Twitter and I'm not really realizing it. But I think this is a worthy cause. So I'm going to continue to try to do this as often as I can. If I'm in a group of people and I pull my phone out, I'm going to verbalize why I am doing that. I'm not going to hide anything, I'm also going to I had create yellow lists to process my thoughts in Obsidian. I've done this, but it's not typical Mike fashion, I guess. It's not done. Like there's more yellow lists to be processed. There's more notes to be created to help me think through things. But I am in the middle of this right now, and it has been very helpful in a decision that I've been brewing on. So definitely see value in this, and I really just want to make this a practice, not a task.
Just so people understand what you're talking about, what is a yellow list?
I don't even remember what the official definition of the yellow list was. I'm using it as like a capture point for my thoughts and ideas around a specific topic, specifically around a decision I have to make. When we talked last time, I mentioned this is kind of what one of those MOCs or map of content is designed to do. You have this mental squeeze point where you're like, I just need to figure out, what do I really think about this thing? But I am applying it specifically to decisions that need to be made. I think originally it was talking about a list of things like, next time I see this person, I need to ask these things and get some answers so I can move on with the rest of my work. But I'm kind of applying this more personally. Sure. All right. And then the last one, be cautious about committing to future dates. I have done this. Actually, David and I recorded an episode of Focused on revisiting hyperscheduling, and this came up where we discount the time we have in the future. And I can't do that right now. I'm too busy. I don't really want to stop the things that I'm doing. But 6 weeks from now, absolutely, I could squeeze that in. And then you get 6 weeks out, and why did I say yes to this thing? So I feel like I've done a pretty good job of this. However, I have noticed there's a shadow side to this as well, in that I find that I want to say yes to things that are presented to me further in the future than I do when they're presented, hey, can you do this right now? If for no other reason than I want to train the people who are making these requests not to throw stuff at me last minute.
Okay, sure.
So I think there's a difference here where it's like, I don't want to do this ever, then yeah, I shouldn't just say yes to kick the can down the road. But if I'm going to be working with people anyways, and I'm going to be doing things anyways, and I have even a little bit of control in the situation to say no to things that are last minute, but yes to things that are further out, I will say yes to those, just so that we can play by my terms. Yep. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, because I know I do a lot of people management when it comes to tech issues. Like the one that made us put off Bookworm recording last Friday is not one I could have put off. But there's a lot of cases where someone says, hey, my email's not doing X, Y, and Z. Can you come look at it? My default answer is yes, in a minute. I'll be over when I get a second. Like it's something along those lines that I'm going to say, unless it's a couple people that I know have spent a lot of time working on things. But the reason I do that is because one, I don't want people to assume I'm just going to jump up and go fix things immediately every time you have a problem. And two, in the world of IT, making people wait about 10 minutes usually resolves the problem because they can't do what they want to do. So they're going to spend some time trying to fix it themselves. And for whatever reason, 10, 15 minutes tends to solve most IT problems without me doing anything. So if we wait that long, it's pretty common for me to get a text or an email, or they stop back by and say, hey, no big deal. It took care of itself, or I got it fixed, or something like, okay, great. And then I never got it from my desk. So there's that as well. But yes, that whole training people thing, I'm totally with you.
There's an article that I published on the Sweet Setup a while back. I'll put the link in the show notes for people. And it was something along the lines of email habits from Napoleon Bonaparte, because he had this habit of having his secretary collect his mail and then delivering it to him like every couple of weeks. And as he opened up the mail, he was giddy with joy at all of the things that had resolved themselves by the time he even looked at them.
Yes.
I think there's a lesson to be
Even
learned
Napoleon had it figured out.
Yeah.
Well, that all said, let's jump into today's book, because I feel like we're both itching to get to this, especially since we thought we were going to get a chance to do this last Friday, and we're not. But today's book is So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport, which is basically a debunking of the concept follow your passion and find work you love, and that whole concept. This is borderline a manifesto, just a long one, saying, hey, don't do that. So I have to admit that this concept of find your passion, find work you love, and you'll never work a day in your life, like that whole concept is one I went down this path very deep at one point and came up wanting on the other end of that journey. And that's a lot of the reason that I wanted to cover this. Also, it's a Cal Newport book that we haven't covered yet, so we really needed to cover it, I think. But I have to ask, Mike, have you ever been down this whole find your passion and follow it concept? Have you ever gone deep on this before, or have you always been a naysayer on this whole topic?
Ooh, that's interesting. As you were saying, did you ever chase this? I was like, well, yeah, of course I did, because it sounds awesome. But then when you say, did you ever go deep on it? I'm not sure that I have. Because my career path, the thing that got me into this space was starting the process of writing my book. I'm not going to tell that whole story again. But one of the things that I discovered in that process was the root of the word passion is the Latin word pati, which literally means to suffer. And that clicked with me early on. Okay, so passion isn't just doing what you love. It's finding something that's so worthwhile you're willing to endure some hardship in order to see it come to pass, which is a very different definition. And I don't think I don't know, I don't really want to reclaim the word passion. The passion mindset means what it means. So spoiler alert, I completely agree with Cal Newport on this one. But I do think this is an easy trap to fall into, because we spend so much of our life working. Why would you not want to do something meaningful, do something that makes a difference and impacts people's lives? That part is, I think, a very pure, true desire that everybody has. It's not just, oh, I want to make a bunch of money. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there too, because money's not necessarily bad. I'm not saying, especially in the Christian circles, I think there's that verse that gets thrown around. The love of money is the root of all evil, and we kind of think we're holier if we just live in poverty almost. I personally don't believe that, but I think it's easy for people to believe that. It's like, oh, well, look, I've just become content with not having a lot. And I think that's a mistake too. I think there is a desire placed inside of every human to do something bigger than themselves. And so the short version of this rambling monologue here is that it's complicated, but yes, I feel like I have walked into this just like probably every other person who's listening to this podcast at one point in their life or another.
Yes, because I think whenever I did this, I was in the midst of working at a job where my boss was less than helpful and created problems that he then blamed on me. So wasn't exactly a healthy situation. And I was trying to nail down, like, okay, well, this is in the agriculture space. Maybe that's not where I need to be. And where are the places that I want to be? And what are the things that I love doing? So maybe I should find work in that. And went through a whole process, thought I had a career in mind that I wanted to dive into, tried to explore joining a place to pursue that, and it just completely fell on its face. So then I stayed in agriculture because I could get a job there. And I've never gone back to that concept of find your calling and find a job in that space. Like, I've not gone back to that because it's just never made sense to me since that point. And going through specifically the introduction in this book that Cal Newport lays out, like, it's been one that I guess puts some meat to that angst that I've had in the past, and just kind of helps me understand that, oh, maybe I'm not completely crazy for thinking this is a ridiculous concept. And you can see that in, let's just go ahead and jump in here. So the introduction of this, he follows the story of a guy by the name of Thomas, who at some point decided that his calling in life, the passion that he wanted to pursue, was to be a Zen monk. And that was the ultimate life that you could live. That was his pursuit. And over the period of a few years, he manages to get accepted into a monastery that's difficult to get into. He becomes a Zen monk. He has a bunch of the revelations, and then he breaks down crying at one point because he achieves the end goal that he was after and realizes it's not all it's cracked out to be and doesn't know what to do. After that point, he finally achieves the thing he thought was where he needed to be in life, and it turned out to be a failure. I shouldn't say a failure. It turns out to be not as fulfilling as he expected it to be. So then the question is, what do you do with that? You know, if someone's able to name what their passion is, name their pinnacle, achieve it, and it's not what you thought it would be, now what do you do, right? What's the next step?
That part reminded me a lot of The Second Mountain by David Brooks. And that's why I said in the previous section, the part about how I believe everybody has this desire to do something that is bigger than just create a good life for themselves. The whole idea behind The Second Mountain, go listen to that whole episode. I'm not going to rehash it here, but you climb the first mountain. It's all about you. You get to the top. You go through this existential crisis, and you're like, is this it? And that's immediately what I thought of when Thomas was going to that monastery. He had achieved his personal goal of enlightenment. He had climbed that mountain. There was nowhere else to go. And then he looks around and he's like, oh my gosh, it was all pointless. And it sounded to me in that moment when he was going through his identity crisis that he couldn't find that second mountain that David Brooks was talking about. This is another plug for the, what's it called? Syntopical reading that Mortimer Adler talks about. Every single time I have one of these inspirations where I see how a book we are currently reading connects to the previous book, I am grateful that we have gone through that one. It's the book that keeps on giving,
despite us not liking it.
Yeah.
But that concept, you know, as meta as it is, helps significantly. Like, we suffered through that book. We did not like it. We didn't care for How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler's the one we're referring to. And we didn't care for it. And yet, to this day, ever since we've finished that one, to this day, the way that I read a book has changed. The way that I see connections between books has been greatly altered. And I can't help but notice, like, if I get one solid point out of a book, that book was a successful read. That whole thing comes from Mortimer Adler. And yeah, we rated it like, a 3 and 3.5 or something. Like, it wasn't one that got very high marks from us. And yet I'll tell you, you need to read it.
Absolutely. That's one of those vegetable books that you do it because it's going to pay off in the long run, which kind of a tangent, but I think that's part of the reason why I enjoy reading purely nonfiction. I know you and Josh specifically ribbed me about that, how I should read fiction books. I have never had that sort of feeling after a fiction book. So in my mind, it's not even possible. Maybe it is. I kind of don't think it is though, just because it's a made up story. And just the fact that that could happen when you pick up a nonfiction book provides, at least for me, a ton of motivation to keep going with it, because I might get done with it and think that book was terrible, but it's almost like that's just the beginning of the story. You have no idea how these dots that you've collected, nonfiction dots anyways. For me, in my mind, if obsidian is in the graph, that's the picture of all the dots that I've collected. There's a nonfiction section, which is basically everything in my life. And then there would be a fiction section, which would be all the other stuff. And it's kind of like, why even go there? And I feel for the nonfiction stuff, you collect these dots and you may not have a connection until 5 years after you've read that book. And then it may be totally life-changing.
I just want to argue quickly, because I have to, right? I can't just let you make these concepts.
Go for it.
Make these points. But the thing that I notice whenever I read fiction isn't an explicit, oh, that point is something I can take home. It's like a whole bunch of micro points that are unconscious, that don't come to reality, at least in my mind, until later. For example, there's a character in A Tale of Two Cities. I'm not going to go into the detail of the whole background, but he makes some choices in a courtroom that are fascinating to me in how he handled himself. And yet, when I was reading the story, like, I was totally engrossed in what was going on, but it didn't really connect with me that I could really make a correlation from that until much, much later, after I'd finished reading that story and was talking to someone who was recently in a court case and was working through, what was the judge thinking at a certain time? Why did he decide to do X, Y, and Z? And for whatever reason, that story in A Tale of Two Cities came to mind, and it's like, oh, well, this is how people think about things when they're in a courtroom, because you were able to see into the mind of a character in that fiction story. For whatever reason, that came up in my ridiculous race car brain, and it helped me in that conversation. So I feel like it's not as explicit, but it does come up regularly, at least for me. Maybe I'm an oddball in that.
No, I think I'm the oddball here. I understand you can learn about somebody's philosophy through fictional characters. You're getting a glimpse into the mind of how the author thinks, because they're creating this scenario and they're trying to make a point. And there's some brilliant fiction authors that you could absolutely learn a ton from, but for whatever reason, my brain just doesn't connect to those. It just discards those afterwards, even if I really enjoy the story. It's like those don't even make it into the database. So I'm the weird one, I guess. But yeah, that's just the way my brain works.
Well, let's keep going on the book here. So the way that Cal Newport laid this one out, keep in mind, this was his first one, right? I don't think he had one prior to this book.
So Cal Newport has an interesting literary journey. I think his first book was something along the lines of study hacks and like how to get straight A's in college. So he had written some things prior to this. I feel like this is the first substantially mainstream, maybe that's the wrong term, but the other one seemed very niche to me, and this one seemed more general, career advice sort of a thing.
Blake's got us covered. How to win at college, how to win at high school, and how to be a straight A student. Those are the three he wrote prior to this. Okay.
Yeah, which is what he was writing as he was in college, applying to different universities. And at the end of this book, actually, he talks about his own story, how he applied these principles to get his position at Georgetown, is it?
Yep.
I think that's where he's a professor now. Yeah, and the youngest professor to ever get tenure or something like that. So he's very successful, and I kind of appreciate this about Cal. It feels a lot like he is just teaching what he knows, like he's figuring this stuff out and sharing it publicly, but not in a way where he's saying, I am the guru. Listen to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. In my head, this was one of his first, if not the first, that he wrote. But at the same time, I know that this is, and even looking at this list of books he's written prior to this one, this is the first mainstream, not geared towards students book, I would say. Because this is, and I think this is one of them that put
Yep.
him on the map as far as a potential big time nonfiction author. It might also explain,
Agreed.
like, there are some quirks with this book I'll talk about when we get to style and rating, some things I didn't care for in the style side of it, but I'll get there. But anyway, let's jump through. He's got 4 rules that he lays out here. I'm not really sure. Maybe I missed it. I'm not sure why he chose to make it rules to live by, I guess. Something along those lines. Like, I don't know why he chose to do it that way. To me, they're just parts in the book that seem to go together. I'm not sure why they had to
Yeah.
be called rules. But anyway, he's got 4 rules. The first of those is don't follow your passion, which totally makes sense as a starting point. So in this particular part or rule, he kind of dives into where this concept of follow your passion comes from. And I'm going to draw a blank on what the book was or the paper was, but there was a specific paper or a book of essay, something that came out and kind of created this concept. At least that's his theory. But it really gained some validity in the legendary address that Steve Jobs gave at a graduation. And in that, Steve Jobs made a lot of comments that basically put some legs underneath this concept of, find the work that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like, that concept is one that he helped solidify and basically justified that that's a valid path forward. And people have grasped onto that and latched onto that. And I think if you finish the rest of this part and realize what Cal Newport is saying here is, like, you have to be super careful with this whole, I don't even know what to call it, this maxim. What's the term for it, Mike? Like, it's a, I don't know, it's not a virtue, but it's a thing that people want to live by.
I don't know the term, but yeah, the follow your passion. That's the key phrase here. It spiked in popularity, by the way. This is in the MindNode file for me. In 1970, following the publication of What Color Is Your Parachute by Richard Bowles. And the Steve Jobs thing, this kind of bugged me too, but I never really realized why. Interestingly, I forgot all about this part of the book. I have read this before. This is one of my favorite books. It was interesting to reread it and see how things are a little bit different for me, just different stage of life. But when we did episode 50 and we did the draft, this was, I think, number 4 on my top 5 books of all time.
Yep.
So I've thought very highly of this book for a long time, and I completely forgot about this Steve Jobs graduation speech at Stanford. Have you ever watched this? It's on YouTube.
It's solid.
Yeah, it's solid, and it's interesting because I think he's giving this speech after he was diagnosed with cancer. So he's kind of got a glimpse of the end. He's coming to grips with his own mortality. But I think if you watch that, as I watch that now, I look back and I see a confirmation bias evidence in the words that he's speaking. The same bias where if you interview somebody on a championship sports team right after they win the title, they talk about, oh, it was no surprise that we got here. We set a goal at the beginning of the year and we worked really hard and we knew we were going to be here. You didn't. You didn't know you were going to be here. That's a story that you tell yourself because it sounds nice and you feel good about the accomplishment. But the truth is that all of the other teams had the same goal. And so the goal wasn't the thing that got you there. But that's kind of what people latch on to is, oh, well, you just set a goal and then you work hard to achieve it. And of course, you're going to achieve it. The problem is in that specific sense where there is a goal, where there's a limited amount of success to be had. Only one team can be the NBA champions. It happens to be my Milwaukee Bucks. So there you go. But so there's different ways that this can apply, but this is a zero-sum game. It doesn't necessarily apply in a non-zero-sum game. I think there's benefit to goal setting. I just want to get that out there right away. But that's the evidence that he builds this whole passion mindset around, is just do what I did, essentially. And he deconstructs what Steve Jobs did and kind of shows how he kind of didn't follow his own advice, which was fascinating to me. I'll just share some of the details here. He had this scheme, him and Woz, where they were trying to sell 50 of these, I think they were Apple II boards, to somebody. And they wanted to sell them for $50 each because they thought that was a lot of money. And the person that they went to, Paul Terrell, said, I don't want your boards for $50 each, but I'll buy 50 computers for $500 each. And that, to me, as I read that story, Paul Terrell is the key player here in Steve Jobs' success. Now, you can argue that Steve Jobs would have encountered a different opportunity and he would have taken advantage of it later. But this is the tipping point for him, because Paul is basically saying, hey, you're thinking 10 times too small, and throws a deal in his lap that ends up launching Apple Computer. So there's a lot of luck that goes into this, a lot of being in the right place at the right time. And we just got done reading Courage is Calling. I fully understand, the harder you work, the more courageous you are, the luckier you get. So just putting yourself out there, you drastically increase your chances. But I feel like that story is a very good one to use to make the point that you can't just follow what Steve Jobs said in that YouTube video.
Yeah, and some of this might have to do with like how you define some of the terms that Steve Jobs is using. We've read enough books that have talked about Steve Jobs and Apple, and it seems like it's one of these stories that you have to include in a nonfiction book in order for it to be published. I don't know if that's a requirement, but it feels like it sometimes. But if you read, so here's a verbatim quote from that address. You've got to find what you love. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. Like, this is one of the phrases in that address that this whole passion mindset comes from. But if you pay attention to Steve Jobs, he was very intentional with each word that he used when he was on stage. Watch any of his Apple keynotes, and he was very particular with how he worded things. So I can't help but think that he was the same in this address. He didn't just think about it that morning and then get up there and wing it. I highly doubt that Steve Jobs did that.
Yeah, agreed.
And if you look at what he's saying here, it's like, you've got to find what you love. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. But he's specifically calling out great work there.
Yeah, and see, that part right there,
Correct.
I agree with. There's so much nuance in
Yep.
this. This whole chapter, or this whole section, don't follow your passion, that reminded me of Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy. It's something he said, don't follow your passion, but always bring it with you. If you bring your passion with you, according to Mike Rowe, you will do great work that you love, but you can't attach to the enjoying it part first.
And I think, there's a difference between what I think Steve Jobs was saying and what he intended, and the interpretation that people had of the address. Because I think that the interpretation of the address, as Cal Newport explains it, is spot on. Like, we absolutely took it as find what you love and go with it. Quit your job and go. Like that. That is the idea that people took from the address. I'm not 100% certain that that's what Steve Jobs intended. I highly suspect, as he's saying, to do great work, I suspect that there's a big, big caveat in that you have to make sure that that's marketable. Like, there has to be someone that wants it. Like, just knowing his background, I am very suspicious of the way that we interpreted that address. So maybe he was having an end of life thing. Maybe he was intending it to be that way. I'm not sure I'm sold on that. Regardless, that point set aside, our interpretation and the media interpretation of what he said absolutely follows what Cal Newport is using as a basis of his argument here. But he doesn't stop here. Like, he doesn't put all of this on Steve Jobs. Of course, you mentioned the book that came out in the 70s that kind of started this. But the whole issue here, and he starts to lay out some of the groundwork for why this is a bad idea. And a lot of that is it sits on top of the concept around, is it really going to make you any money? Like, it seems like that's a big part of it. He doesn't specifically call it out in that way, but it seems like that's a big chunk here, because whenever you see some of what people say are their passions, a lot of times they're hobbies that don't drive incomes. Like, I love kayaking. Like, some of mine, like, I love woodworking. I love working on my house. Like, I love that sort of, like, but making money off of that to drive an income so that I can pay for said house, there are ways to do that today, kind of, but in order for that to work, I've got to be a top-notch video editor, and I don't really want to be a top-notch video editor. I want to work on the house. Like, that's the way it goes. So you have to be careful with it. It's dangerous, as Cal Newport puts it.
It is. He mentions Derek Sivers later on in this book, and I just got done reading a Derek Sivers book as one of my Gap books, Heck Yes or No. And there's a chapter in there which is very appropriate for this particular section, where Derek Sivers is saying that you should not try to become a professional at your art. You should have your job, which is going to provide for your needs, and you should have your art, which is the thing that you do for fun. And I feel like there is this inherent pressure with the passion mindset specifically, but for any creator, it's like you're not doing it well enough unless it's your full-time job. And I think that's false. I think there are certain things that you should not try to turn into a full-time thing, because the minute that you do, it's not going to be the thing anymore that you enjoyed doing. Just by the very nature of trying to monetize it, you're having to change the message behind it, or what it looks like, what it sounds like, in a way that's more appealing to other people. And in doing that, it's no longer appealing to you. So that is something that was bouncing around in my brain as I read this particular section. And then the other thing I want to address, you mentioned that Steve Jobs maybe didn't mean it the way that it was interpreted, but that's the problem, is that people will say things and they will be interpreted out of context, and there will be a whole big, this is essentially a doctrine, this passion mindset. This is a doctrine that has gained a bunch of motivation. And there are people all over the place who are like, yeah, man, I'm just going to follow my passion. I'm going to just do what I love. And it's going to ruin their lives if they follow that. That's what Cal's trying to say. And even if it's only a small handful of people who heard that wrong from that YouTube clip, I mean, that's just one specific clip. There are people all over the place who are saying things all the time, myself included, where if you were to sit down and ask me, so what did you really mean when you said that? It didn't come across as clearly as I thought it did. So I'll explain it. But you don't always have the opportunity to do that. You just hear these things and you're like, oh, that was really good. I think I'll build my whole life around this one thing that somebody said, which is why you need to read lots of books. It's in topical reading, collect a whole bunch of things, not just attached to one and see where this goes, but see the picture between all of these and how they connect. So I feel like the big benefit of this book existing is that it kind of course corrects for some of that stuff. But if you exist specifically in the culture we have today, where people are focused on the headlines and social media and just the little sound bites, no one's going to read the whole thing. No one's going to listen to the whole thing. They're going to attach to one thing that somebody says. There has never been a time where this message has been more dangerous, I would argue.
Yeah, especially if you think about like the rise of YouTube stars. I mean, think about that. It's a thing that, technically speaking, the ability for you to record a video and edit said video, technically speaking, is crazy easy. Most everybody's phone can do that very simply and can do a pretty good job of it, honestly. And because that is so easy, And because we see so many YouTube stars rising and quickly, a lot of kids have that as an aspiration. Like they want to be a big YouTuber. Like that is their dream. There are a lot of kids that have that dream. And that's a very big ocean for that little tiny fish to start swimming in. Like that is ginormous. But if you think about some of those top YouTubers, like they've been doing this for so long, and they've learned skills to be good marketers or video editors professionally before they became the big timers. Like it's so easy to get into it that we think we want that, and you think that you want to be a big time YouTube star because you get to make it and set your own schedule, and you can do whatever you want whenever you want, and all you got to do is post a video, once a day, and you'll make millions of dollars. Like that's the concept, right? But that couldn't be further from the truth. Like it's just a mess to get into if you really, really want to do well at it. One of the instances here, or one of the quotes in this book, because I want to go on to the next one here because we're going to spend way too long on this book if we're not careful. But the thing here is that we do see people who do this. Like they have a passion, they quit their job, they follow through on it, and it's successful. Like we hear that story, we love that story. It's one that's in the movies. Like it's the thing that we love to grasp onto. But the trick here is, as Cal Newport puts it, observing a few instances of a strategy working does not make it universally effective. So even if you see a few people who do this, it does not mean it works for everyone. Talk to any pro athlete. How many of them have been a prodigy, been good at basketball their entire lives and never deviated? How many of them have been, a top tennis star from the day they were 4 and never left tennis, and now they're at the top of their game? Federer never did that. Like he was on all sorts of different sports teams and played a bunch of different sports before he dived into it. As Blake says, talk to any pilot. Like that's just not, it's not the norm. It's far and away not the norm.
And it's not the whole story, I think. It's easy to latch on to that and say, oh, this is what I did. But Cal Newport's whole point is that finding a meaningful career that is actually pretty complicated. And you can kind of stumble into it maybe because all the right ingredients are there. And if you're trying to dissect how did I get here, it's easy to credit the wrong source of your success.
Absolutely. So let's go on to rule number 2, since these aren't called parts. And rule number 2 is titled after the book, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And I got to find it now, but the story here of why or where that name comes from, the Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, is actually from a Steve Martin interview.
The 2007 Charlie Rose show.
So this is, where's it at here?
I got it in my outline if you want me to share the quotes. Yeah. So this is Charlie Rose interviewing Steve Martin, and Steve Martin says, nobody ever takes note of my advice because it's not the answer they want to hear. What they want to hear is, here's how you get an agent, here's how you write a script. But I always say, be so good they can't ignore you. If somebody's thinking, how can I be really good? People are going to come to you. And I love that advice. I think that's golden.
And it's one that he took on because he wasn't having many people hunt him down. So he started honing his comedy craft and becoming top-notch, doing things that people didn't normally do, trying to, lay out stories, punchlines and such in a way that, really drew you in, which wasn't always typical at the time. People liked to do the one-liners for comedy at the time. So he kind of helped pioneer a new age of comedy because of this mindset. And it's that basis that Cal Newport then sets up as the craftsman mindset. And instead of finding the thing you love to do and then go do that, it's find something you're good at and get really, really, really good at it to the point where people can't just skip by you anymore. They have to stop and pay attention.
But that's the part nobody wants to hear. What they attach to is the fact that Jim Carrey wrote a $10 million check and carried it around in his wallet till he was worth enough that he could cash it. But every single day, he was embracing this craftsman mindset and trying to develop skills that were valuable enough that he could land a $10 million gig. He didn't just fall into that because it was the thing that he loved to do. The universe owes you nothing. You have to go make it happen. You have all the tools to make it happen. You have all the opportunity to make it happen, but it doesn't just automatically happen. And even in that example, he uses that one later on in the book. It's kind of shocking. I found myself even attaching to that story. It's like, oh, that's a cool story. I should hang on to that. I could use it. And no, that's completely contrary to all the advice that he is giving. We don't want to hear just put in the reps.
Because that's hard work. And we like shortcuts. We don't want to have to spend 10 years working on something. And you don't want to have to write 1 million words that are published before you become a good author. You want to be able to just sit down and write a bestseller. Like that doesn't happen overnight. That's not something that you can do. Some people are better at it and can pick it up faster than others. Some people, to use the video editing thing, some people can grasp concepts around editing videos much quicker than other people and can pick up the tools to do so a lot faster. But if you pay attention to what we're saying, that all comes back to this craftsman mindset where you're focusing on becoming better at your craft in some way. This section is where he starts talking about the 10,000 hour rule as well, that whole thing that was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. So that concept comes up here. He doesn't really say he doesn't like it. I know we've had some books where they say that's a myth, like it shouldn't be a thing, but the idea is still there, right? Like you're not going to be the best violinist in the world unless you spend thousands of hours practicing and getting better at it. So he does lend some credence to that topic. So anyway, well, all I'm saying is this is what he's proposing as an alternative to the passion mindset, which is this craftsman mindset. And as much as I agree with him, I also have to admit, like, this is hard and not one I really want to like adopt and say, hey, yeah, that's the way I do things, because you have to commit to being someone who's going to practice at things and make a lot of mistakes in the process. And that's not pleasant. It's not a fun experience.
He talks about the 10,000 hour thing. He says that deliberate practice is the key there. And the unfortunate thing about deliberate practice is that it's not obvious in a lot of disciplines. Two things that are required for deliberate practice: strain and then feedback. So I think that's a nugget that can be helpful for people. But I do want to go back to the advice, and no one wants to hear just work hard. And I want to ask, why don't we want to hear that? Because that should be terrific news. That should mean that in most disciplines, not basketball, because I'm not tall, not athletic enough. So that one's out. But pretty much anything else that you can name, I have the opportunity to become great at it. I just need to put in the effort, just like anybody else who has done it exceptionally well. Writing, I think, is a great example of this. I hesitate to say this, but I kind of think it's true that anybody can become a great writer. You just got to put in the reps. That should be great news for somebody who wants to be a writer. They don't have to just land in the right situation. It kind of reminds me of Mindset by Carol Dweck. You're not just born with this ability and you're trying to figure out what is the thing that I was put on this earth to do. I do think there are some things and some desires that are clues to that. Not desires like, oh, this is fun, but getting back to that original meaning of passion, things that are so meaningful that you're willing to suffer to see them come about. Those should be indications of things that are maybe things that you should lean into. Ryan Holiday, again, if something is scary, you should lean into it, that sort of thing. But the playing field is level for a lot of people. And so it doesn't matter where you started. What matters is how you finish, what you are going to do. I mean, all of this stuff kind of connects together, but Blake was talking about James Clear earlier in the chat, writing the book that you need to read. his book, Atomic Habits. Habits are an essential piece to this. If you want to write, become a writer, you need to write. You just show up every day and write. And every single time that you sit down at the keyboard and you actually do it, you're developing this career capital, which is a key idea from this section, that you can leverage then to get a career that you want. Not just something you enjoy to do, but something that is meaningful, something that you are skilled at, something that the marketplace is willing to reciprocate and say, yes, this is valuable to us. I mean, everybody needs to hear this. Why is nobody talking about this?
I feel like we like to have an excuse for not doing something, because then the onus isn't on me. Like that whole personal responsibility thing that we talk about, I feel like it comes up regularly. We don't like it. Like it's a thing that we see people who are successful in life, and honestly, social media makes it even easier to find thousands upon thousands of people who are more successful than we are, no matter where you're at on that scale, depending on how you define the scale. But because of that, it means that we feel like we're not living up to the potential that we have ourselves, but obviously it's somebody else's fault, not mine. I'm not a millionaire because somebody else didn't give me the skills, or somebody else something. I mean, you get what I'm saying? Like, we want that excuse. And when you tell somebody that you could be top notch at writing, all you have to do is this one little habit and do it every day, and it only takes 20 minutes, people don't want to hear that. So, it's not something that we want to admit, because then the onus is put on ourselves, and it's not something I can put on somebody else.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. I'll just reiterate this idea of career capital, though, for anybody who wants to change their work situation. This is a phenomenal idea. This can change your life. The basic idea is that you continue to develop yourself and develop the skills that are valuable in whatever marketplace you want to enter. And if you do that, if you select and study and deliberately practice the skills that the marketplace is looking for, then you can demand a higher price when you enter that market. One example, I think, would be coding skills. I use that because it's an example that is relatively recent, but not brand new. But everybody has probably seen those job offerings where we're hiring a Ruby developer and you need this many years of experience to be able to do these sorts of things. As long as you meet those requirements, you can make a pretty nice salary, right? So it's the skills that you develop that qualify you for that type of position. It's not how bad you want a coding job. But that's one cherry-picked example. Writing was another one we talked about. You can apply this to any sort of discipline. Don't discredit the idea, I don't know how that could work in my situation. You focus on collecting the career capital, and pretty soon you can write your own ticket.
Absolutely. I want to define two things, because I feel like we mentioned the terms, but we didn't actually explain what they were. But the concept of career capital, which I think you were talking about, is that concept of building up your skill set to the point where you're highly valuable to someone else, whether that's as an entrepreneur or to a company. So building up the capital you have in your skill set is what we're talking about there. But then he also does talk about this deliberate practice, which I think we've talked about in past episodes, where yes, you can put in your 10,000 hours, but unless you're being intentional with trying to improve yourself with those 10,000 hours, you're still not going to be expert in the field. So just be aware of those. Which, that said, that brings us...
Hold on. There's one more very important fact we need to discuss here. Chapter 7, Becoming a Craftsman, the whole section where he's talking about deliberate practice. Cal mentions that he was in a rock band called Rocking Chair.
Yep. I did not know he was a musician at all. So
I don't know if that's brilliant or terrible. Yeah, I forgot about that. That seems like a very Cal Newport band
Rocking
name.
Chair. Okay, so rule number 3. So we got rule 1, don't follow your passion. Rule number 2, be so good they can't ignore you. Rule number 3, turn down a promotion. And he does have a subtitle on this one, or the importance of control. And the idea here is that a lot of times we get promoted. You know, if you're good at your job, you get promoted. What is that promotion typically? It changes what you're doing day to day. So let's take, you brought up development. If you're a coder, if you're really good at coding, for whatever reason, in our crazy, made up business minds, we realize that if someone's really good at coding, obviously they're good at managing coders, because those skills are perfectly translated from one to the other. I don't know why we think this, but if you get really good at development work, they can promote you to senior developer or project manager. And when you get into those roles, you're now overseeing other developers, not necessarily from a technical stance, but as far as like work management stance. So it doesn't actually translate your skills anymore. Thus, the promotion actually causes problems, and you lose some of that ability to control what you're doing day to day because you're now stepping backwards in the scheme of career capital. So turn down a promotion, what he's referring to is don't take that promotion. Instead, use your skills and go to a different area where your skills are worth more, as opposed to going up the chain, if you follow me there.
Yeah, I think the easy example you mentioned already, and that is you get into a technical job, you excel at it, you get promoted, now you have to manage people, which you have no training for, and you don't like it. I know several people who have found themselves in that particular situation. And I'm always kind of shocked when they get in that situation and then they find out that they don't like it and they end up leaving. I'm always like, well, what did you think it was?
Why did you do that?
I mean, you're managing people. People suck. So you either deal with it or you don't, but you should know that, I think, before you even get into it. I'm always kind of shocked. Like, you thought this was going to be easy? You thought that the people on the schedule were not going to act like children? This was a given in my mind. So I guess maybe I don't have a ton of empathy there, because it just seems so obvious to me. But his point is well taken. Recognize that the things that you like about your current situation are going to change anytime. Not necessarily, I guess, but there's the possibility that they're going to change drastically as you ascend the ladder. So ascending the ladder is not necessarily the thing that we are looking for here. The thing that we are looking for is the control that you mentioned. Control to say, this is the way I want to work on my terms. Going back to a previous section, I think maybe it was the first section, he talked about the self-determination theory and 3 basic psychological needs to feel motivated at work: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. I think this is the section where you should start thinking about, if you're amassing career capital and you're starting to figure out what is the situation I want to put myself into, how can I make sure that those buckets are full for me? And you should know yourself well enough to be able to determine what that looks like. If you don't, then that's the place to start. But once you do, I mean, just the fact that something is scary is not a reason not to do something. He mentions Derek Sivers in this section, the Derek Sivers rule. If something is scary, you should do it. And I mentioned earlier that also echoes with the book we just read by Ryan Holiday, which was great. Think about how to create the situation that you want, not just the ones that are available in the job boards that you're looking at.
I think you can see some of this in current job markets, especially in the US, with the access and prevalence of vaccines, to go to the COVID world. A lot of employers are starting to request their workers to come back to the office, which means we're sacrificing control over our schedule to go to the office. And people are leaving left and right. Like, it's a mass exodus, it feels like, from going to the office. And it's going to force the acceleration of some of the knowledge work mechanisms, I guess, as far as like how we work, those conversations, I think, are being
Yep.
accelerated right now, which I feel like it's probably about time that happened. In the same manner, though, to me, it's interesting, especially having read this, because you have to give up that control over your daily schedule now, because so many people have figured out how to
Mm-hmm.
run and get groceries midday, or they've got the kids at home doing schoolwork while they're at their day job. That all goes out the window when you have to go to the office for the day, and it makes it quite difficult. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you have the career capital. If you put this whole thing together, you're working to build up your career capital. Once you have enough of that, you can exchange it for control. And, if you take like your role
Yep.
or my role, like we've built up enough of this career capital in each of our roles that we can pretty much set our schedule throughout the day. Like, yes, I'm at the office, but if I need to run to the big box store to pick up screws for a project at home, like I could do that at 11 o'clock in the morning and come back, and it's not a big deal. No one even really, like, is Joe in the office
Mm-hmm.
today? Like, it's not where is Joe? He's supposed to be here. That's not a conversation that happens. It's, Joe's car's gone. Is he out for a little bit or is he out for the day? Like, that's the conversation that happens. But it's not just me. Like, that's our whole office.
Let's get on Microsoft
Yeah.
Teams and ask him. Oh, wait, we won't get
It's
him.
not even there. So, okay, well, where's Joe's boss? He can text him. So, like, that's what happens, right? But it's a thing that people are after, is this control piece, and that's the part that I think Cal Newport is saying is vital in this. If you're working towards becoming a craftsman in your skill, and you gain control over your work and the way that you work, like that's the part that makes it quote unquote dream job, because you're able to utilize your skills as you feel is best. Hopefully I summarized that well.
I agree with that. I do think there is a little bit of a false sense of control in the current environment, though. There are so many people leaving their jobs because they don't want to go into the office. And that's not the only reason, but that's the one you use. So let's just latch on to that one for this thought experiment. So many people don't want to go into the office. The organization has 50 people that they want to bring back into the office. 20 of them quit. The company is going to feel that. They are going to give away more control to those employees to get them to stay, because it would be very expensive to fill those positions with somebody else if they could even find them. I mean, right now where I am, there are fast food restaurants that are paying $17 an hour because they have to close the dining room and go drive through only because they can't find enough adult workers to show up. Not kids, specifically adults. So if you're in that situation, you can kind of have this sense of, oh, this is great. I can dictate the terms. I have control. For now, you do, but control that's acquired without career capital, he says in chapter 9, is unsustainable. And I feel like we're going to get to that point where things are going to settle down, and there's going to be a bunch of people who got themselves into a position because they thought they had control. They thought maybe they don't. I think maybe if you understand the idea of career capital, you don't fall into this trap. But all of a sudden, the company's like, no, we're not going to pay $17 an hour for someone to run the drive-through anymore. So then what do? You get let go. You get your feet knocked out from under you. Now you got to start all over. He makes the point here again in chapter 9, lifestyle design without this career capital is dangerous. So let's go back to the office example, and I'll get away from the fast food thing. You've dictated the terms. You've said, I am going to work from home. Well, that's great, as long as it's harder for them to replace you with somebody who's willing to work from the office than it is to give you what you want. But career capital is the thing that's going to give you the power to put your thumb on the scale. It's going to give you the leverage that you need to control that situation. If you don't have the career capital, market conditions change, you lose the leverage. And I guess you could say that's a risk with career capital. But I feel like if you are in the business of collecting career capital and you're paying attention to the market, you easily just shift a little bit and you collect some career capital in an area that's related to what you're currently doing, but not exactly the same. That's my whole career path. Is I was doing one thing, and then I found a thing that was kind of ancillary to that, and it did that thing, and then something related to that did that thing, and eventually you land in a spot where you're really good at this thing, and this is the thing that's valuable. And we're gonna compensate you for that. So if you are constantly looking at the horizon and you're asking yourself, what's next? What's the next thing for me to develop? How can I get better? I feel you don't fall into this trap, but I feel like there's a lot of people who are going to, because enthusiasm alone is not rare and valuable. Just because you're excited about this thing doesn't mean that it's going to be sustainable and you're going to be there for a long time.
In the midst of all of our house remodel stuff, I got a chance to talk to a handful of subcontractors that work in sectors that very few people seem to want to go into. And one of those was in the world of like HVAC, furnaces, water heaters, that world, ductwork. And talking to the guy who came in to put our new furnace in, and he was saying, he's like, hey, well, if you know of anybody that's interested in getting into, HVAC, let me know. It's like, okay, well, how much experience are you looking for? He's like, none. I'll pay him $28 an hour. Okay. So it's like, nobody wants to do it, but it pays well. So like, okay. So he was looking for absolutely zero experience and paying $28 an hour, and he couldn't get anybody to take him up on it. So to me, I can't get my head around that whole thing. But anyway, there's that. You got anything else? We go on rule number 4.
Just to kind of summarize this, in chapter 11, he talks about do what people are willing to pay for. And I think that maybe sounds on the surface a little bit contrary to everything that I just said. I just think that what people are willing to pay for, we're seeing some false positives at the moment. I don't think the HVAC thing, that is something people will be willing to pay for, just like plumbers are traditionally one of those things that people can make a lot of money in that field, but nobody thinks about that in the career fairs because it's not sexy. It's not appealing. It's not something you go around bragging about, oh, look what I get to do. But it's a great example of the type of job that if you're going to get awesome at it, people are going to pay you a lot of money to solve problems that they have that they don't want to deal with themselves. And you could apply passion to that particular area. You could take a lot of pride, have a very fulfilling career being an expert plumber. We actually bought our current house from what's the term? Master plumber?
Yeah.
I forget. Yep. Yeah. So he was a master plumber from Chicago, and all of the different things that are in here, you can see like the care and the attention to detail that he had. There's in our backyard, we have a walkout basement, and we have this large concrete slab, and we put a basketball hoop up, and the people who were pouring the extra concrete to extend that slab, they had to level it. And there's this drain down there, and they're like, oh man, this is really flat. You must have water in your basement every single year. You must just like pile up back here. We're like, no, we've actually never had water down here. I'm like, what? But it's so flat. And it was just so precise. He had all of these systems and all these pipes that funnel it, away from our house, and all the other houses around us have had water in their basement at some point, but we don't, because he knew what he was doing. And I love stuff like that. I love seeing people who have embraced that craftsman mindset, and they're just something as simple as how the pipes are laid underground. It's like they really put a lot of thought into how they crafted this. I think that's beautiful. And you could do that with HVAC. You could do that with anything. It doesn't have to be something that we think of as naturally artistic or beautiful. It doesn't have to be a YouTube video. It doesn't have to be a podcast episode. You can find your own avenue for expressing that.
Well said. That's tough to beat. So let's go into rule number 4, which is think small, act big. And this title, I feel like, doesn't necessarily fit super well. I get what he's saying, but this whole section is about missions and setting a mission that you can then work towards with your craftsman mindset in developing your career capital, to put all the buzzwords here together. And he does dive into like certain profiles of specific individuals talking about how they've got a mission and how they're using that as a drive for their development of skills and putting together a meaningful life. And this whole part is one that I feel like is important. Like, what is your mission in life? But to me, the most important piece of this is that he calls out specifically that trying to put together your mission first is a bad idea, and that in order to put together your mission, you first need to develop that career capital, your skill capital,
Yes.
before you put that mission together.
Mm-hmm.
And I had so many things come in my head when he started to lay this all out, like the concept of don't, in the world of content marketing and content creators, like, don't try to sell a product until after you've written, I don't even know how many blog posts I recommend now. Like, don't try to put together a product until after you've written so many things and garnered enough feedback from those products to decide, or from those posts to decide what that product should be. Like, it's that concept, right? Don't try to put together the mission that you're going to work towards until after you've worked on honing your skills and becoming good at what you're doing.
Yeah, he has a idea here. I think it's chapter 13 of the adjacent possible. He mentions that big ideas are almost always discovered there. So you're doing something and it's not quite hitting the mark. And I don't want to say it's not quite hitting the mark, but you may think 100% this is the thing. And then you look up, you look to the left or to the right, and you see another possibility, which is just a slight deviation from what you're currently doing. And then you're like, oh, that looks cool. And then you try that. And that's where the mission comes. That's where you discover this is really the thing. And I think that even evolves over time. So you could be doing the right thing at the right time. You're totally in alignment with the mission for you right now. And it may change a little bit as your career progresses, but this is the key. Assuming you do everything that Cal has laid out up until this point, you've developed the career capital, you've gotten a pretty good job because of the capital that you have collected. This is really the thing that's going to take you to that next level. And this next level, I don't think it's close. I don't think it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, 1's a 4, 1's a 5. This is like going from 3 to 10, in my opinion. This is significantly higher, significantly better. It's hard to describe how it feels when things click. But there's a reason, to your point, that this is at the end of the book, because you don't have any idea what this is going to look like. And I feel like the passion mindset in a nutshell is trying to start with this mission and then to create a job for how you're going to spend your time that is going to feel fulfilling. If you take the opposite approach, though, and you develop this career capital, this is a lot easier than it sounds.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is kind of flipping the passion mindset backwards, because we like to jump to the end. And I like the way you just put this, because it makes me think, as I was reading, it occurred to me that we oftentimes want to jump to the end. This is also coming back to we don't want to put in the work, we just want to get the end result. Like, we don't want the personal responsibility on us that, we don't want to admit that we could become an excellent, top-notch author if we just do these little things and get really good at what we're doing. We're really good at writing. Like, we don't want to admit that, because we like to jump to the end. We like to, shortcut things. Like, we love those rags to riches stories where somebody accelerates all the way to the top in the span of just a month. Like, we love those stories, right? But that's not the norm, and it's not universally possible, right? So that's where we like that, and yet we have to admit that that's not the path for us, because it's not likely to happen. And when it comes to a mission versus a passion, we oftentimes want to figure out what that mission is first, which might be the same as trying to figure out what your passion is in a lot of cases. Like, you're going through probably a lot of the same steps, but you're doing it backwards because we're jumping to the end when you shouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. So yes, and as Blake says, those stories where you jump from the beginning to the end very quickly often aren't the full story. Take the Steve Jobs concept. like we've talked about. Like that's not, find your passion and live it. Like that's not his story. He definitely worked at things over a period.
Yep.
So yes, one point inside this part, this rule that he calls out is that missions require little bets,
Mm-hmm.
and those little bets are like you're taking a small chance on something to find out if it's going to fit a bigger picture. And doing that in theory is super simple, but this is a piece that like when we've talked about things recently, Mike, we've often talked about like taking time back, a minute to think, taking a break, giving yourself margin, going on walks. Like I feel like that concept has come up a lot lately. Maybe that's just because that's my life. I don't know. That development of ideas process requires these little chances that you're going to take, these little bets, as he's calling them, to figure out what this mission is going to be and working towards that mission. But that requires these breaks, and that requires that concept. So I appreciate that it's in this because this is written back in 2012. Yeah. This is not a recent write. So it's, to me, it's fascinating that even back then, like he was noticing it at that point. So maybe he's far and away ahead of us and we need to pay attention to him more, or that's just a thing that we've been slowly working our way towards, or fastly working our way towards, and need to stop and put the brakes on.
I would love to buy Cal Newport coffee and talk to him about hustle.
Yeah, sure.
Because my definition of hustle, not just one I created, but the one that I like, is to force to move hurriedly or unceremoniously in a specified direction. And I break that down into 3 parts, starting with the vision or purpose or mission, Cal would call it, which is kind of the destination, which way we going to go. And then you break that down, you have the unceremoniously part. That's kind of the route that you're going to take. That's the career capital that he's talking about. That's going to get you to the destination. And then lastly is the work part. But you kind of have to do it backwards. You have to start with the destination, then you plan your route, and then you get in the car and go. And the passion mindset, I feel, is just like, well, let's get in the car. But you can't steer a parked car, which is that analogy just really clicks with me in this section on mission. That's kind of how I feel. If you are going to start with the mission and you're not going to start with the career capital, that's kind of what you're doing. Is you're just picking a point in the horizon. Is it over there? Is it over there? Is it that way? Is it behind me? You have no idea, and you're just grasping at straws. But that statement about the little bets and constantly kind of course correcting, once you gain some momentum and you start moving and you start collecting that career capital, it is very easy to make an adjustment and go around a detour. But when you're starting from zero, any sort of obstacle between you and the destination feels insurmountable because you can't see a way around it. But the moment that you have some action associated with it, you realize, oh, it's really not that big a deal. I just, go over here a little bit and then eventually I can get back over there. Or maybe once I make that turn, I realize that actually this thing over here looks even better. So I'm going to modify my destination. But until you take that first step of starting to do the work, this is not even a conversation worth having.
Totally fair. Anything else on Rule 4? I want to talk about the conclusion here quick.
I really like the law of remarkability, which says that for a mission-driven project to succeed, it should be remarkable in 2 different ways. It must compel people who encounter it to remark about it to others. It must be launched in a venue that supports such remarking. I feel this encapsulates very well why some things go viral, some things don't. And that's not just like a particular post. Like I'm thinking specifically of Federico Viticci was quoted in the New York Times for a couple tweets about the apple polishing cloth. He was talking on Connected about how it kind of annoyed him. Like, of all the stuff that I've written, that's the one that you're going to latch onto? Really?
That's the thing.
Yeah, so I'm not talking about that specifically, but if you take a step back, like Mac stories in general, that's something that a lot of people will remark about. And it's because it is remarkable. And he's created this thing, where people will talk about it to other people and launched it in a venue where it supports such remarking. I feel on a smaller scale, maybe Bookworm falls into this category, but the formula for creators, I feel like we want to find ourselves in this place where we are worth remarking about, but you can't really manufacture that like catching lightning in a bottle. Like a lot of people, I feel that's their approach to trying to go viral. That's never really appealed to me. I just tend to focus on making the best thing that I can, and hopefully people like it. And over time, it's a slow burn, but more and more people end up reading what I write, listening to the podcast, that sort of thing. And I feel like this explains perfectly how you could get to that point. So, I mean, we've never had a Bookworm episode that's like 100x the downloads that we normally get. No one has Grubered anything that I've ever written where, he shares a link and the site shuts down because so many people are there. But if that is a goal of yours, I feel this is the way to approach it, because these two questions will influence the way that you create the thing, not in a way where you're trying to catch lightning in a bottle, like I said, but you're creating something that is more valuable. And then kind of the fallback is, even if it doesn't go viral, even if it doesn't blow up, it's still adding value and it's still going to help grow your thing in the long run.
I think a good way to summarize a lot of what we've talked about here, this whole process from don't follow your passion all the way through what is your mission, is very well summarized in the conclusion of this book, I think, because he tells his own story and how he's in the process of becoming a professor at Georgetown and how he got to that point. And there's not really anything I want to call out specifically from that. Just as a high-level overview of that section, of the conclusion here, it's encouraging to me whenever an author takes their recommendations and then shows how they followed their own advice. It adds a little bit of credence to the whole process that he's laid out here. And it's very obvious to me that it's not a system per se, but it's definitely a process he wants you to walk through. And he doesn't say, like, you need to do these in this order, and this is how you need to do it. He just takes, like, here's my story. Here's how I've applied these 4 rules. He does do them in order, but he doesn't ever say, like, you need to do this. That doesn't come out. It's definitely an implied call to action there. But I just wanted to say, like, I appreciate him laying out his story and how it applies here.
And it's interesting because he wrote this book and he's telling his story about how he's applied this stuff to get the position at Georgetown, which at the time that he was applying for it, everybody was saying, oh, you're going to have to apply to 300 places and it's going to be really, really hard. And it wasn't for him. He got a pretty great job right at the beginning of it. And he wrote that conclusion kind of right before he took that job. When I read that again, I remembered the first time that I read this book, which probably was pretty close to when it was published. And it reminded me of the exact spot that I was, because we were actually celebrating Christmas with my wife's family at this big Airbnb in Watoma, just like this giant house that we all just went to for a couple of days. And I brought this book to read, and it was one of those like old Victorian homes. And so it had this great big like reading room right by the front door with a great big Christmas tree in it and a chair. And I was sitting in that chair and I was reading this, and I thought to myself, oh, I guess that's all we'll hear of Cal Newport. Because he's going on to bigger and better things now. But turns out he still writes books. So I'm glad that happens.
Yep. Still a writer. Still does it. Well, what else, Mike? I've got myself to a spot where I'm ready to jump into action items.
That's all I got.
Okay. Well, as far as action items go, I have the one that you gave me at the very beginning of shaming people who are on their phones and saying, hey, what are you doing? So we got that one. So Bookworm Club members, like, you need to do this. Shame people. Force them to narrate what they're doing on their phone. Anyway, unrelated. However, for me, I've got one main action item here, and that is to simply process what the skills are that I want to spend time honing. Because I have a ton of things that I do, and I've never formally nailed it down as to like what are the ones that I want to spend time developing career capital within, because it's quite varied. So that's the one thing I want to spend some time on, and it's probably going to happen on nature walks, but that's forever the story with me. So anyway, that's the one thing I want to try to nail down. It's like, what is that skill set that I'm trying to hone?
Nice. I don't have any official action items other than the one that I got when I read this book almost 10 years ago, which was continue to collect and develop career capital. I feel like this is a lifelong pursuit. It is never going to be finished, but just that whole idea, I feel that has been very transformational for me up until this point, and I believe that it will continue to provide value for me in the future. So it's not something that I'm going to check off as done, but it is something that I am going to continue to do.
Sure. As for style and rating, I talked earlier about like there's some stuff I didn't like with the way he set this up. One of those is that at the beginning of the chapters, he like spoils it for you and says, he has the title of the chapter, and then underneath of it, it's like, in which I argue that X, Y, and Z. And it kind of bugged me. Like the first couple times, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then like third, fourth, fifth, 10th times, like, okay, dude, you got to stop. Like, please quit doing this. And it was obnoxious to me time I got done. I'm sure it's probably a positive thing overall, but I did not care for it at all. So I wish he hadn't done that. He was good at storytelling at this point. I know that some of his later books, he's very good about using stories to tell, to make the point that he's trying to make. I don't know what his earlier 3 books are like, but this one seems like he's got that somewhat figured out. And he's definitely improved as a writer, I would say. This is an odd case where we've read some of an author's later books, and then we're going back to see where they but where they were previous. So it's a little odd from a style stance to see that, because I feel like he's definitely gotten better. So I find myself comparing present day Cal to earlier day Cal, and it's different. Definitely different. So there's some stuff I don't like, just in the way he had that all laid out. As far as like rating and what I think about it overall, I think this is definitely something a lot of people need to read. It's one that I know many, many folks subscribe to this, find work you love concept. It seems like that's the prevalent mindset, and I wish it wasn't. And this feels like a good slap in the face that a lot of people need. So if you subscribe to that, like, I don't like my job, like, you need to read this first before you make any career decisions. So please do that. That said, like, as far as a bookworm book goes, and how to rate it, I think I've got to put it at a 4.0. Like, I don't think it's anywhere near the 5 territory. To me, it has a number of like, wait, you're using Steve Jobs there, but I'm not sure that's what he meant, but you never called that out. It's like there's some stories like that I feel like there's more to the story and you're leaving it out to make your point. Like there's some of that just kind of makes me like, wait, hold on. How truthful is this? Not sure. Maybe that's just me being skeptical. I don't know what that is, but it doesn't feel like it should go above a 4.0. So I'm going off a feeling on this one, Mike. So 4.0.
All right. Well, I'm going to go off of evidence and say this is a life-changing book and easily 5 stars.
Okay.
I feel this book is, maybe there's a couple more that have impacted me professionally more than this one, but I can't think of them. I really think this whole idea of career capital, I had not heard this before, but if that's the only thing you get from this book, this has the potential to completely change your life. And I think that's justifiable of a 5.0 rating. I don't think that it's longer than it needs to be, which maybe is the way I'm describing it, a concern. I feel he does a great job, very concise, getting to the point. I agree. The beginning chapters were kind of weird, where he writes it more like an academic than he does like a writer. So I do think that he's grown in that area over time. But I was able to look past that pretty easily. That didn't really throw me off, even rereading it this time. I feel like the stories that he shares here, these are the most effective ones out of any of the other books that he's written. I feel this is easily his best book, to be honest. I do think you can nitpick specific things, and he's become a better storyteller over time. And so, like, when he's talking about digital minimalism and the servers going down and things like that, that actual story from a writing perspective is better than some of the things that he shares here. But I feel like the collection of stories to support the point that he's making, this is his best work. It's almost like you have your life's message, and then you want to keep writing, so you're finding other things to do. But I kind of feel like this is the one, he nailed it on this one. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe 10 years from now, there'll be something else that we're just like, oh my gosh, that was actually the thing for Cal Newport, as he continues to develop his own career capital. But yeah, this book is great. I would recommend this to anybody. I've gifted this one to many people. I can't really think of anything negative that I would say about it. I think this is for everybody. I don't think it's just for people who are looking to change their situation. I feel like this is something you need to be aware of. You may not realize, you may think your situation is pretty good, and then you read this and you're like, oh, but actually I've kind of always wanted to do this thing, and this kind of gives you a path to get there. So you don't have to just settle for wherever you find yourself. This is a very empowering book for just about anybody. And I feel like even if you're not trying to switch jobs, even if you're trying to just master a skill, improve things with your home life, your family, I mean, there's lots of different ways to apply the advice that's in this book. It's not just how to get a better job. So absolutely everybody should read this one, just like absolutely everybody should practice shaming people who are staring at their phones and not narrating what they're doing.
Well, here's hoping that as time goes on, maybe I'll join you and want to re-rate this one. We'll see. But yes, I can see how this could be one that sticks around for quite a while. I do. All right, Mike, let's shelf this one. What's next?
Next is Soundtracks by Jon Acuff. I mentioned this last time. We have not read a Jon Acuff book, which is kind of surprising to me. So we're going to read this one. The subtitle is The Surprisingly Simple Solution to Overthinking, or something along those lines. Spoiler alert, I have already read this one. So I am looking forward to discussing it with you, and it has also influenced a Gap book that I am currently reading.
Fascinating. Well, following Soundtracks, we read a book here by Cal Newport from 2012, but this one might be the oldest we've had on Bookworm. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's called Self-Control. It's Kingship and Majesty by William George Jordan. This was originally published in 1907, and it's technically a religious book from what I can tell, but it's considered one of the main precursors to today's self-help book category. And I'm very curious to see like how that translates to the type of books that we do on Bookworm. So this one might require a little bit of translation on your part and mine, Mike, to get some of the religious pieces covered well here. But I feel like this could be very interesting to go back, because I was trying to find like what are some of the books that were like the beginnings of the self-help world, and this came up quite a bit. So that's why I wanted to cover it. So we'll see how that episode goes, but I'm fascinated by it. That's for sure.
Cool.
So yes, there's that. What's the Gap book? What's the thing you're going to do?
The Gap book actually fits that category description as well. This is an older book that I did not realize was a religious book, but kind of seems like it is. And that is The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. This is one of those books that gets thrown out there along with 7 Habits. Like, everyone should read this. It's sold something like 15 million copies. And I'm going through this one because this is a topic that was kind of touched on a little bit inside of Soundtracks. So we're going to unpack that one next time. But it's an interesting idea to me. And so I grabbed a book that kind of continued to pull on that thread in my brain.
Cool. I'm in the middle of picking a Gap book. I finished this one a little bit early, so I'm getting to that point where I need to put a Gap book in. So somebody tweet at me good Gap books. I've got a list, of course, but I'm always fascinated with what other people are recommending at this point. So send me a message or tweet me on Twitter. Let me know what you're reading. I need to pick one. So there's that. That said, super grateful for the folks who have been in the chat today. Like, you guys, it's been super cool to see some folks messaging us as we're recording this. It's always, it does inform what we're talking about, and sometimes it helps me understand my own thoughts a little bit better. So thank you for those of you who have been willing to type in that chat box as we're recording here today. But if you're interested in watching us live and joining us when we record these, follow Bookworm on Twitter, because I always post those links for when we're recording, day of at least, if not the day before. So pay attention to that. Also, if you haven't already, you need to go to bookworm.fm/membership and sign up, because you can join the club and get some special perks if you're a part of the Bookworm Club. You get some special wallpaper that Mike put together. You get his MindNode files, especially in PDFs. I think that's probably the one I look at. I do look at your MindNode files, by the way, usually after, because I don't get them ahead of time. It's probably good that I don't get them ahead of time, Mike. But yes, you get access to some of those things. So definitely go to bookworm.fm/membership. Join the club. We'd love to have you on board.
Indeed. And if you are reading along with us, pick up Soundtracks by John Acuff, and we will walk through that one in a couple of weeks.